everyone, Teresa here for the Knit Petite project, and this week we are continuing on with our very practical look at a pattern and things to look for, like hallmarks within a pattern that are going to make it easier for you to modify. So we go through that with a bunch of steps that I would encourage you to actually go through with a pattern of your selection, whatever that might be. It's sort of designed to be for a sweater. So it's ideally for a sweater that you actually have the pattern in your hands. I mean, you could try to do it with a sweater pattern that you haven't purchased yet, or maybe you don't have those details for, but it is best if you have the sweater pattern in your hand itself. It walks you through a few steps, so things to look for, like within the pattern notes. It asks you to check for a couple of different ways of figuring out measurements within the pattern and ways that you're going to be able to modify it. It also goes through a bunch of different sweater constructions, which might be old news to many of you, but it's also kind of a bit, I think, of a good refresher to remember all of the different constructions and the way that the sleeves can be shaped, and to look for the way that shaping is done within the pattern itself. And then at the very end I go over a few other complicating factors, so things like design elements, which of course make sweater patterns very attractive and beautiful, and they set them apart from other sweater patterns, so things like stitch textures and cables and color work, and why those things might be something that you want to consider before you select a pattern to modify, or at the very least figure out what it is that you can do with things like that within a pattern to make it fit with the modifications that you have to do. So it's kind of a general overview, but it's kind of guiding you through looking at whatever the sweater pattern is that you have selected. I go over a few points of the one that I have selected, and for the purposes of this week's post and the next 3 weeks or so, I've picked Winter Doldrums from Knitty by Clara. I can't pronounce her last name, but I will put a link beneath this video so that you can check it out too. I picked that sweater pattern because it's free, so we can all look at it and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I know perfectly well that Knitty follows the CYC sizing guide, so in a couple of weeks when we start looking really at the numbers and using it as an example, I know perfectly well the numbers that that designer looked at in a sizing chart to base her pattern on. And I also picked Winter Doldrums because it's sort of a complicated example, so I didn't want to pick something that was too simple and it made it look a little bit too easy to Petite. And the reason why it's a little bit more complicated is because it is a bottom-up colorwork yoke sweater. And so with something like a colorwork yoke, many Petite knitters, though not all of them, have to consider altering a sweater pattern in the colorwork area. So I'm going to have to, in the coming weeks, think about how I'm going to modify all that beautiful color work within the yoke. I'm going to have to consider if it's too wide around my shoulders. And so I think walking through something that has that level of complication with everyone is it's going to be a really good exercise in showing the things that you should consider and how you can surmount things that seem really tricky. So with your own chosen sweater pattern in hand, go through those steps, and please, please, please head over to the Knit Petite Project Ravelry group, where we can all have a discussion together about, the pattern we chose and whether it does or doesn't have the information that I outlined there. I mean, every pattern isn't going to have all that information, and they don't always necessarily need to have all that information, but it's kind of, the cherry on top if they have all of that stuff, so that it gives you as much information as possible, so that when you move forward figuring out how to tweak something to, make the yoke depth shorter, or alter for your back waist length, or move certain part elements up or down, the more information it's going to give you, the better. So again, it's a very practical post this week. In the next few weeks it's going to continue to be super practical. So I hope you're interested in doing this with me. I found it really kind of fun, actually, to go through the different sweater constructions and the different shoulder shapings and things like that. So please let me know if you think I've missed something. So there's so many different ways of constructing a sweater, different directions that it can be done, different elements that could be put into a sweater that may make it easier or more complicated to modify. So if there's anything that you feel like should be added to the list, just let me know. You can find me here, there, and everywhere across all the social media as Canary Knits, generally. You can find all of the Knit Petite project information on canaryknits.com/knitpetiteproject. I encourage you also to check out the plan. It's a link that you'll see there when you go to the main Knit Petite project page, because the plan shows you everything that we've done and that we're planning on doing, with the caveat that everything is, we can shift it around to follow whatever our needs and interests are. So that's what's happening in this week's post. I encourage you to check it out and join the conversation in the Knit Petite Project Ravelry group. Again, I will put that link below this video. So again, any questions, comments, advice, anything that you want to add to the project, this is collaborative, it's body positive, it's non-judgmental, and I want it to be a tool for all of us petite knitters to be able to take control of our knits and make them work for us. So stay tuned for the rest of the weeks of 2017, because we're going to be going over all sorts of stuff to help you as a petite knitter make your knits fit you the way you want them to. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Later.